The cold vacuum of space pressed in on the UDF fleet like a predator closing in on its prey. Captain Ethan Walker stood at the center of the Resolute's bridge, his dark eyes scanning the stars through the massive viewport. His face was set in a mask of calm determination, but inside, the tension was palpable. Every star, every speck of light represented a world that might not survive the coming storm. "Status report," Walker said, his voice steady but sharp, cutting through the low hum of the command center. "Enemy forces have entered the Sol system," Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell, the fleet's communications officer, reported. "They're moving fast, crushing the outer defense stations. We've lost contact with Sector 23. Damn it!" Walker ran a hand through his short, salt and pepper hair. The Caldari Empire wasn't just another alien threat. They were a juggernaut. Their ships outclassed anything humanity had thrown into the stars, and their tactics were as brutal as their technology was advanced. Walker knew they'd hit hard, but he never imagined they'd hit this hard, this fast. He turned to his first officer, Commander Jason Clark. "How long until we reach the front lines?" "Less than 20 minutes, Clark replied, his voice tight with anticipation. "We'll be there before the Caldari have wiped out the entire outer fleet. They'll be expecting us." "Good," Walker said, his jaw clenched. He needed every second, every advantage he could muster. "Alert all ships, prepare for combat. No one breaks formation. This isn't just a fight for colonies, it's a fight for humanity's future. We hold the line here, or we lose everything." The bridge went silent as the crew moved into action, their faces reflecting the weight of their duty. Walker's mind raced, running through every possible strategy, every countermeasure. They were outgunned, outnumbered, and underprepared for the full force of the Caldari assault. Yet he couldn't shake the thought that there was something the aliens didn't understand: humanity's resilience. "Helm, set course for the asteroid field just beyond the fourth moon," Walker ordered. "We'll use the terrain to our advantage." "Aye, Captain," came the quick response from the helm officer. Walker's hands gripped the back of his chair as he turned his attention to the tactical display. The Caldari fleet had breached the outer defenses, their warships towering and sleek, cutting through space with an arrogance that sickened him. They didn't understand the one thing that had always made humanity dangerous: the will to fight, to survive, to endure when everything seemed lost. The bridge was tense, the crew operating in silent synchronization as they hurtled toward the engagement zone. Mitchell's voice cut through the hum of the ship's systems. "We've received a message from the Caldari, Captain. It's unusual. They're taunting us." Walker raised an eyebrow. "Put it through." A crackling voice filled the bridge, harsh and metallic. "You are foolish humans. You dare to challenge the Caldari Empire? Your pathetic fleet will be crushed, your colonies reduced to ash. The galaxy will know that your species is nothing but a fleeting mistake." Walker remained still, his eyes narrowed, his hands gripping the arms of his chair. There was no surprise in the Caldari's words, just the usual arrogance. The same arrogance that had cost them dearly before. He looked toward Mitchell. "Tell them we're ready for them." Sarah's fingers danced over her console, typing quickly. The message was clear, concise. "We're coming for you," she sent back. Walker's eyes flicked over the display. The asteroid field loomed ahead, a mass of debris and rock just waiting to be turned into an obstacle course. It wasn't ideal, but it was the best option they had. The Caldari would expect a head-on confrontation, but Walker was determined to make them regret their assumptions. They thought humanity was weak, just a small, young species on the galactic stage. Let's see how they react when humans turn the tables. "Helm, slow to 1/3 speed," he ordered, his voice low but firm. "Clark, deploy the mines along the asteroid periphery. I want every ship in position by the time we hit the field." "Aye, Captain," Clark responded, already giving orders to the tactical team. As the Resolute and its fleet entered the asteroid field, Walker could feel the weight of his crew's expectations. They were ready to die for Earth, for humanity, but that was something the Caldari didn't yet understand. It wasn't just about winning, It was about proving that humanity wasn't a footnote in the galactic history. They were a force to be reckoned with. The communications officer's voice cut through the tense silence. Enemy ships inbound. They're taking the bait. We've got one shot at this. Walker leaned forward, his eyes locked on the screen. The Caldari ships were in sight, their sleek forms cutting through the debris with deadly precision. They were coming in fast, expecting to smash through the human resistance with overwhelming force. Steady, Walker muttered to himself. He trusted his crew, trusted their training. But now it was time to put everything on the line. Deploy the mines now, Clark! He barked. The tactical officer gave a sharp nod, and the asteroid field suddenly erupted in a series of explosions as mines detonated. The Caldari fleet, caught off guard, had no choice but to break formation, scattering in all directions. A couple of their ships, smaller vessels on the fringes of the fleet, were torn apart as the mines found their marks. Now bring us to full speed, Walker commanded. The Resolute surged forward, cutting through the debris as the rest of the UDF ships followed suit, emerging from the chaos with weapons primed. The Caldari, now on the back foot, struggled to regroup, their superior technology unable to adapt quickly to the surprise assault. Walker's face remained calm, his mind razor-sharp as the battle unfolded. They had done it. For now, they had thrown the Caldari off balance. But he knew the fight was far from over. Captain! Clark's voice broke the silence. They're regrouping. It's not over yet. Walker's eyes burned with determination. It won't be over until they know who they're dealing with. For the first time since the invasion began, a glimmer of hope flickered on the Resolute's bridge. Humanity was fighting back, and the Caldari were starting to realize they had made a grave mistake. The battle raged on, the distant stars now barely visible as the EDF fleet, led by the Resolute, maneuvered through the debris of 1,000 shattered asteroids. The Caldari had regrouped, their warships sleek and formidable, but there was something in the air, something that felt different. Walker could sense it. Humanity's resilience had planted a seed of doubt in the Caldari's minds, and for the first time, they were being forced to think, adapt. Captain, enemy ships are adjusting their tactics, Lieutenant Mitchell reported, her eyes flicking between the screens. They're breaking up into smaller groups, trying to flank us. Walker nodded. They're underestimating us if they think they can outmaneuver the Resolute. Commander Clark, what's our status on the remaining mines? Clark glanced at the tactical display. We've got a few left, but we'll need to be strategic with them. The Caldari are getting smarter. A low hum filled the bridge as Walker paced slowly, his mind running through a dozen scenarios. The Caldari were good, no, they were great. But they didn't understand the one thing that had always set humanity apart, adaptability. They were used to rigid, predictable tactics. Humans, on the other hand, thrived in chaos. Deploy our remaining mines along the edge of the field, but don't cluster them, Walker said, turning to Clark. Spread them out in a zigzag pattern, just enough to create confusion. Once they think they've found a safe route, we'll hit them where it hurts. Clark's fingers flew over his console. Aye, Captain. Adjusting now. Captain, Mitchell said, a slight edge to her voice. I'm detecting a Caldari comm signal, directed at us. Put it through, Walker ordered. The voice that came through was cold, metallic, with an air of superiority that Walker was growing all too familiar with. You've fought well, humans. But your efforts are futile. Surrender now, and we may allow some of you to live. Walker leaned forward, his gaze fixed on the screen. Tell them we don't surrender, General's Rack. And they'll regret underestimating us. Mitchell quickly typed the message. We don't bow to invaders. The Caldari's response was swift and filled with contempt. You will regret your defiance. This is your final warning. Walker's expression didn't change, but inside, he felt the stirrings of something deeper. Anger, yes, but also determination. This ends today. Clark, I want all ships to form up. We're going to take the fight to them. Aye, Captain, Clark replied, his voice steady, though there was an unmistakable thrill in his tone. He had always enjoyed the challenge of a fight, especially one like this. The Resolute moved forward, flanked by its fleet, the ships cutting through space like knives through butter. The asteroid field had served its purpose, but now it was time to take the offensive. The Caldari might have superior firepower, but they had made one fatal mistake. They thought they knew how humanity would fight. Brace for impact, Walker muttered under his breath. The Caldari's ships loomed ahead, their sleek forms a symbol of both terror and arrogance. It was time to make them regret thinking of humanity as weak. Fire at will, Walker commanded. The Resolute's weapons systems roared to life, a salvo of plasma missiles streaking across space, aimed directly at the Caldari flanks. The enemy ships, caught off guard by the unexpected aggression, struggled to react in time. But Walker knew they would adapt quickly. It was all part of the plan. Deploy the secondary mines along their predicted route, he ordered. Set them off on a staggered delay, make them think they've cleared the trap. Clark gave a quick nod. On it. Walker could almost feel the tension in the air as the battle unfolded. The Resolute fired another round of missiles, sending shockwaves through the Caldari fleet. The ships swerved and veered, trying to avoid the attacks, but Walker had already anticipated their moves. The mines detonated in waves, sending several Caldari vessels into chaos. A massive warship on the left flank was hit, a fiery explosion erupting in its wake. For a moment, the bridge of the Resolute was silent, the crew watching with bated breath. Walker allowed himself a brief moment of satisfaction. They're rattled, he said quietly. Keep the pressure on. They'll break. The Caldari, however, were not to be underestimated. They regrouped quickly, their ships adjusting to the new threat with unnerving efficiency. One of the larger Caldari ships, its black hull glistening under the distant stars, suddenly surged forward, heading straight for the Resolute. Brace for impact, Clark shouted, but Walker was already 3 steps ahead. Activate the deflector shields and fire the EMP pulse on my mark, Walker ordered. The ship lurched as the shields powered up, and in that instant, Walker had his target. The Caldari ship was too focused on their assault to notice the trap that had been set for them. The Resolute fired a concentrated EMP pulse, sending a wave of electrical energy that temporarily disabled the enemy ship's systems. Now! Walker yelled. The crew sprang into action, and another salvo of plasma fire erupted, striking the Caldari ship. This time, there was no escape. The warship disintegrated into a ball of flame and debris. Mitchell turned toward Walker, her voice filled with disbelief. Captain, they're retreating. Walker stared at the tactical display, watching as the remaining Caldari ships scattered into the darkness. The arrogance that had marked their every move had faltered, replaced by the cold calculation of a retreat. This isn't over, Walker muttered under his breath. They'll come back. But this time, they'll think twice. Sir, we've received a message from the Caldari fleet, Mitchell said, her fingers flying over the console. They're demanding a ceasefire. Walker let out a low laugh. Tell them they've misunderstood. We don't negotiate with invaders. The message went out, a firm and unequivocal declaration of humanity's resolve. They would not surrender. They would not bend. The Caldari had come to conquer, but they had learned, perhaps too late, that humanity could not be easily crushed. As the last of the Caldari's ships vanished into the dark void, Walker allowed himself a moment of reflection. They had won this battle, but the war was far from over. The galaxy would know one thing for certain after today: humanity was not to be underestimated. Prepare for the next move, Walker said, his voice filled with quiet resolve. We're not done yet. The battlefield had shifted, but the war was far from over. Captain Ethan Walker stood at the helm of the Resolute, his eyes tracing the scattered remnants of the Caldari fleet. Victory had tasted sweet, but it had been a fleeting moment. The Caldari had retreated, but Walker knew better than to think they would stay down for long. The enemy was ruthless, and their pride would drive them to retaliate. Captain, Commander Clark said, his voice low and strained. They're regrouping. I'm detecting multiple Caldari signatures on the far side of the system. They've pulled back, but they're not finished. Not surprising, Walker replied, his gaze fixed on the tactical display. They'll come back harder. They have to. But we've bought ourselves time. That's all we need. Walker had always been a student of human history, and he knew one thing for certain: when pushed to the brink, humanity always found a way to survive. It wasn't always the strongest or the most advanced who triumphed. It was those who refused to give in, no matter the odds. He turned to Lieutenant Mitchell, who was carefully monitoring the Caldari fleet's movements. What's their next move? Looks like they're consolidating their forces, Mitchell replied, her fingers flying over the console. They're sending in reinforcements, more ships, heavier firepower. They're preparing for a final assault. Walker let out a slow breath. They've underestimated us before. They're about to do it again. Clark stepped forward, his hands clasped behind his back. What's our next move, Captain? Walker's gaze shifted to the stars outside the viewport. The vast expanse of space seemed indifferent to the struggle that raged within it. But in this moment, the Resolute was humanity's shield, its crew the last line of defense. He knew they couldn't hold forever, but they didn't need to. They just needed to push the Caldari back long enough to strike a decisive blow. We set the trap again, Walker said, his voice calm but firm. We know their tactics now. We lure them in, and this time, we don't just defend. We go on the offensive. Clark raised an eyebrow. You're suggesting a counter-strike? Exactly, Walker replied. We've got one chance to break them, to make them realize they can't just wipe us out like they've done with every other species they've conquered. We hit them hard and fast, and we don't give them a moment to recover. The bridge crew exchanged glances, but no one voiced any doubt. They were ready. Walker could feel it. This was the moment they'd been preparing for. He had faith in his crew, and more than that, he had faith in humanity's ability to adapt. The Caldari may have superior firepower, but humanity had something they didn't: the capacity for surprise. Mitchell, Walker continued, I want you to start jamming their communications. Keep them blind to our movements until it's too late. Aye, Captain, Mitchell replied. Her fingers were already in motion, sending out waves of interference that would mask their ship's movements and communications. Clark moved to the tactical console, beginning to map out the strategy. We'll need to set up a distraction. If we can pull their forces toward the edge of the system, we can hit their rear guard while they're focused on the front. Walker nodded. Exactly. We'll bait them with a small detachment, make them think they're winning, and then... He paused, his gaze hardening. We hit them with everything we've got. As Clark and Mitchell coordinated with the other ships in the fleet, Walker remained at the helm, his mind sharp and focused. He wasn't just leading a fight, he was leading humanity's last stand. The Caldari thought they could wipe them out. But Walker knew this: they had no idea what humanity was capable of when pushed to the edge. The fleet moved into position under Walker's careful direction. The ships split into two groups: the decoy force, a small but agile contingent designed to pull the Caldari forces into the trap, and the main fleet, which would be lying in wait, hidden in the shadows of the nearby gas giant. Captain, Mitchell said after a tense silence, the Caldari fleet has entered the trap zone. They're taking the bait. Good. Hold position, Walker ordered. The minutes felt like hours. Walker's fingers drummed lightly on the arm of his chair, his mind constantly calculating. He could feel the Caldari closing in, and every instinct told him to act, but he had to wait. It was all about timing. Finally, the moment came. Clark's voice rang out with authority. All ships engage! The trap sprang to life, the UDF fleet emerging from the shadows like a pack of wolves closing in on their prey. Plasma missiles streaked across the void, striking the Caldari ships with precision. The Caldari, caught off guard by the sudden assault, tried to regroup, but it was too late. The rear guard, the part of the fleet that had been focused on the decoy, was now exposed and vulnerable. Walker watched as the Caldari fleet faltered. Their arrogance had blinded them, and now they were paying the price. The Resolute's cannons fired, tearing into the hull of a massive Caldari warship, sending it into a spin as it erupted into flames. The battle intensified, the UDF ships circling the enemy in a deadly dance, cutting them off at every turn. The Caldari were powerful, but they were beginning to break. Every strike was a message that humanity was not just surviving, but fighting back with everything it had. "Keep pushing them," Walker commanded. "We cannot let them regroup. They will never expect this." Mitchell's fingers flew over the console. "Their forces are scattering. They're retreating again, Captain." Walker's jaw tightened. "They won't give up so easily. But we've done our job. This is a victory, no matter how small." The Resolute's sensors flashed with data, showing the remnants of the Caldari fleet fleeing into the depths of space. The battle had been won, but Walker knew this wasn't the end. The Caldari would return, stronger, angrier. But for now, humanity had made its mark. For the first time, the Caldari knew they were dealing with a species that would not be broken. Walker allowed himself a moment of quiet satisfaction. The battle was over, but the war was still to be won. And he had just proven humanity's worth in the eyes of the galaxy. "Prepare for the next engagement," he said, his voice steady, unwavering. "We fight again when they return. And next time, we finish this." The crew moved quickly, preparing for the inevitable next battle, but this time, they were different. They weren't just humans trying to survive. They were fighters. And the Caldari had learned that lesson the hard way. The silence of space was deafening as Captain Ethan Walker stood at the command center of the Resolute, staring out into the vast black expanse. The remnants of the Caldari fleet were scattered, retreating to the farthest corners of the galaxy, but Walker knew better than to think it was over. The battle had been brutal, more so than anything they had anticipated, but it had been a victory. A hard-won one, but a victory nonetheless. "Report." Walker's voice broke the stillness, his tone tight, his mind sharp. The feeling of triumph felt distant, lost in the weight of what still hung in the air. "Enemy forces have retreated into deep space," Lieutenant Mitchell reported, her fingers moving rapidly across her console. "But their warships are damaged, and their remaining fleet is scattering. They've lost significant numbers." Walker nodded slowly, his eyes narrowing. "They're regrouping. We've only delayed the inevitable." Clark, standing at the tactical console, spoke next, his voice cautious. "Captain, we've sustained heavy losses as well. The Resolute is intact, but our fleet's not in fighting condition. We'll need repairs, and fast." Walker turned toward Clark. "We're not stopping here. The Caldari will come back stronger. When they do, we'll be ready." "We can't hold forever, Captain," Clark said, his voice strained with exhaustion. "They'll bring reinforcements. We need to think about our next move." Walker took a deep breath, his hands clasped behind his back. His crew had given everything in that last engagement, more than they ever should have had to. But they were human. They fought to protect what was theirs. They would do it again, and again, until the Caldari understood the price of messing with humanity. "We'll do what we always do," Walker said quietly, his eyes scanning the tactical display. "We fight. And we win." The quiet murmurs of the crew filled the space around him as they turned their focus back to the task at hand. The battle was won, but they weren't finished yet. The Caldari had learned a hard lesson, but it was clear they would never stop coming. Humanity had taken its first stand against the galaxy's most ruthless invaders, and now they would have to decide how much they were willing to sacrifice to win this war. Hours later, the Resolute was back in orbit around the small, barren moon they had taken shelter in after the battle. The crew had been hard at work, patching up the ship, gathering supplies, and preparing for whatever the Caldari might throw at them next. Walker stood alone in the observation deck, watching the shimmering light of distant stars. The stillness of the scene was a stark contrast to the chaos they had just endured. The door behind him slid open, and Commander Clark stepped in, his expression tired but resolute. "We've patched up what we can," Clark reported. "The fleet's ready for now, but they'll need more time for full repairs." We'll have to go into hiding soon, Captain. We can't take on another full assault like that. Walker turned toward him, his gaze unwavering. We won't have to. The Caldari will think we're weak. They'll think we've run out of options, but that's where they're wrong. Clark frowned. We're pushing everything to the limit, Captain. The fleet's exhausted. The crew, they need time to recover. I know, Walker replied softly, his voice softer now. But we don't have time. Every minute we wait gives them more time to prepare, and we've already seen what they can do when they have the advantage. Walker turned back to the viewport. We've made them bleed. The galaxy is watching. And if we show weakness now, we might as well hand them the victory. Clark remained silent for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Understood, Captain? Walker's thoughts drifted back to the message from General Zrak, the Caldari commander who had once believed humanity would be easily crushed. They had shown him the cost of underestimating them. But he wouldn't stop there. No, the Caldari would only grow more determined. We'll strike first, Walker said finally, his decision clear. We'll hit their supply lines, their rear guard. We'll make them fight on our terms. Clark's eyes narrowed, a spark of understanding in them. A guerrilla campaign. Hit them where it hurts, then disappear. Exactly, Walker said, his voice filled with resolve. We'll force them to stretch themselves thin, keep them off balance. They won't know where the next strike will come from. Clark smiled grimly. You're planning to drag this out, aren't you? For as long as it takes, Walker replied. If the Caldari think they can break us, they've got another thing coming. The days that followed were a blur of covert strikes, ambushes, and harrowing escapes. The UDF fleet moved quickly, attacking the Caldari's supply convoys and scattered outposts. Walker's plan was simple but effective: make the Caldari bleed slowly, take what they could, and retreat before the enemy could regroup. It wasn't glorious, but it was working. Every attack was a statement. The Caldari had attacked expecting easy victory, but humanity had shown them that every inch would be fought for, no matter the cost. Captain, Mitchell's voice crackled over the comms one evening. We've intercepted another Caldari transmission. They're desperate. They've taken heavy losses, and they're pulling back to reinforce their home systems. Walker allowed himself a small, grim smile. It's working. They're feeling it now. But don't get comfortable. They won't stay down for long. 2 weeks later, Walker stood on the bridge once more, staring at the swirling clouds of a distant gas giant. His eyes were tired, the weight of the ongoing battle settling deeper with each passing day. The Resolute was battered but still standing, her crew exhausted but unbroken. The fight was far from over, but Walker could sense the change in the air. The Caldari were retreating for now. But they would be back. Captain, Clark said, walking toward him. The fleet's holding steady. We've pushed the Caldari back, but there's a lot of uncertainty. We've won battles, but we haven't won the war. Walker nodded, his eyes hardening. I know. But the Caldari will never forget this. We've shown them what happens when they underestimate humanity. And when they come back, and they will, we'll be ready. The price of victory had been steep. But it was a price humanity was willing to pay. They had survived the first wave, and they had sent a message across the galaxy. Humanity would not go quietly. The Caldari might be stronger, but humanity had something they never would, a spirit that refused to break. Walker turned to face the crew. We've fought for today. But we will fight for tomorrow. This war is far from over. And we will win it.